Welcome to the Grateful American Radio Show, hosted by author and publisher David Bruce Smith. What did George Washington do that you might not know about? What did Abe Lincoln know that could change the way you think about the Civil War? You'll learn about all that and more on this special show designed to restore excitement in American history. Let's get started. Hello, this is Hope Katz-Gibbs, host of the Grateful American Radio Show. We are here in New York City with my co-host, David Bruce Smith, founder of the Grateful American Foundation, with Gilder Lehrman Institute's president, Jim Basker. He's also the Richard Gilder Professor of Literary History at Barnard College at Columbia University, and we are in his New York City offices. Thank you for having us, and welcome to the show.
It's great to have you here. I look forward to this.
Before we jump in, let's tell the audience a little bit about Jim Basker. He's been president of Gilder Lehrman since 1997, where he has overseen the development of history education initiatives nationwide, including history high schools, teacher seminars, traveling exhibitions, digital archives, and the National History Teacher of the Year Award program. He's also served as project director for several history exhibitions at the New York Historical Society. Jim was educated at Harvard, Cambridge, and Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. He's taught for 7 years at Harvard before coming to New York, and he has been a visiting professor at NYU, Cambridge University, and Rogue Community College in Oregon. If that's not all impressive enough, he was also the founder of Oxbridge Academic Programs, which has sponsored summer programs and teacher seminars in Oxford, Cambridge, Paris, and Barcelona for more than 20 years. So that really is just an amazing thing. So now David and I would love to talk to you a little bit about Gilder Lehrman so that our audience really understands what this institute is set up to do and what you've accomplished. So I'm going to throw the mic over to David.
Jim, actually, I want to ask you two questions. The source of your interest in history and what Gilder Lehrman is all about.
Well, I'll try to be simple about the first. You think back in your life, when did you become aware of history or intrigued by it? My mother was an elementary school teacher, and she had 5 kids raising us in southern Oregon in a very rural community. But there was a gold rush town nearby called Jacksonville. And I think at about the age of 7, she took me for the first time to the museum there, which is artifacts from 1850s and 60s. And I can remember looking in a case, a dusty old-fashioned case in probably 1959 or so, and realizing, click, these people were 100 years ago. And it seemed magic to me. It was just fantastic. So I would credit my mother with kind of triggering that interest, and it's just been there ever since. So, Gilder Lehrman, you wanted to ask about how this bridge, my interest in history, bridges over. Well, my career is as an English professor, although I've always been historically oriented, and my studies took me, to very historical places like Cambridge and Oxford. But it was really because of contact with 2 philanthropists here in New York, Richard Gilder and Louis Lehrman, who had, by the early 90s, built up a very, very large collection of manuscripts, original manuscripts of American history, 65,000 of them, going all the way back to Washington, hundreds of letters of Washington, papers from the American Revolution and all the founders, Abraham Lincoln letters, Civil War soldiers' letters. But what these 2 men wanted to do, rather than put their collection away in a vault, was to use it to improve K-12 history education across the country. So they brought me in, first as a consultant, and then as someone they wanted to lead the Institute to build programs. How do we use these materials to reach teachers and empower them, give them resources in the classroom, deepen their knowledge of American history? How do we use them to reach students and even the general public across the country? So over the last 20 years, that's what we've been doing, is building programs, which we now have in all 50 states, thousands of affiliate schools and so on. We've been very lucky. And of course, I couldn't have done it without 25 really superb colleagues who've been brilliant on every front of what we do.
Okay, but let's just go back to that turnkey moment. Everybody has a turnkey moment in their lives. So let's just say your mother had not taken you to that dusty old town. Do you think you would have gone along the historical path anyhow?
Probably, because sooner or later it was going to happen. My father was, although he was an accountant, he had a personal interest in history that was very deep. And he was a reader. In fact, in the dining room in our old Victorian house, much to my mother's dismay, we had the Encyclopedia Britannica in a case in the dining room, because when topics came up at the dinner table, my father would want to pull out the Encyclopedia Britannica and get the facts, get the truth. So the interest was there in both of my parents from the beginning.
Okay, so that career trajectory was English literature, right? Which is an indirect route through history.
It was a bit of a failure, I have to confess. As a freshman in college, I was at Harvard, country boy from Oregon, scholarship boy there, eager to do what they had an elite major called history and literature, but only 12 students a year were admitted to it. I applied. I didn't get in. So I had to choose, and I went into the English major. My classmate Walter Isaacson did go into history and literature.
He's done okay.
And he's done fine. That's right. Still a good friend. So I had to choose a path, but I was always drawn back to an historical orientation. I've never been a literary theorist per se. I've always been interested in biography and the history, the production of texts, and literature that went back into the Renaissance and the 18th century.
So, all right, let's go back now to Gilder Lehrman. It's what is the mission, and has it gone the route that you anticipated, or have you changed in midstream?
Well, the mission is to promote the study and the love of American history, especially K-12, but globally, not only in the United States, but increasingly through the media internationally. It certainly has changed, David, as you know, with the kind of work that you do. You know, you try projects and see what works. New opportunities come along and you move in that direction. So certain genres of project have worked extremely well. We've had partnerships with institutions like Mount Vernon, like Gettysburg, like the New York Historical Society, where we have exhibition cases where our materials from our collection are perpetually on exhibition. People can go to those institutions any day of the year and see manuscripts from the Gilder Lehrman collection. Those partnerships have been invaluable to us. We've developed traveling exhibitions, and we started with one. And would people be receptive to them? These are not the original artifacts, but they're facsimile exhibitions that travel in panels to small towns, to history centers, to schools, to churches all over the country. Well, the response to the first of them, which was actually an exhibition of Alexander Hamilton back in 2004, was so strong that we now have 10 different thematic traveling exhibitions in a total of about 30 sets, traveling nonstop, and they're booked out months ahead. So we have about 130 communities a year that host a Gilder Lehrman traveling exhibition. We developed an affiliate school program, which hadn't been part of my original vision. We had history schools in New York that had an American history curriculum, and that was great, but they're resource intensive, and we could only do a limited number. I wanted eventually to reach every school in America because American history matters in every school in America. So with the help of a grant from the NEH about 6 years ago, we started an affiliate school program that in 3.5 years reached the goal that was set for 5 years of 2,500 schools. As I speak to you, it's now over 5,000 schools, and it's growing the rate of something like 100 a month. But affiliate schools are a network of schools that get resources from Gilder Lehrman, free posters for the classroom, access for their teachers to our teacher seminars, access to our documents and other materials online, opportunities for their students to enter essay competitions. I mean, a whole host of opportunities and resources and training for people in affiliate schools. And my goal there is really, eventually, I know it sounds wild, but with the help of the web, to be reaching every school in America. So I didn't start out, with a specific vision of where we'd get to, but certainly with an eagerness to respond to opportunity and then pursue things that worked.
But even with all these great things that you're doing, how do you explain the large amount of people in this country who don't know anything about American history? For example, Mount Vernon years ago, Jim Rees did he did an outreach program with something like 20,000 schools to find out the percentage of people who knew about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, and it was something like 30 to 40%, had never heard of either. People don't know who Eleanor Roosevelt is. 66% of the country knows the name of the president, knows the name of the vice president. So what's not happening? Why isn't it penetrating more?
Well, there are a lot of contributing factors, I think, to that. And we could talk about competing media, about the emergence of television and what television does, and film and video, and, of course, online distractions in media today. But I think there also have been problems, frankly, in school systems. And we've gone through periods where American history was considered, dull and uninteresting, and in some ways unimportant, which could not be, I'm sure you agree with me, further from the truth. So we regard it as the subject, arguably, of all the subjects the student does in school, as the most important. I mean, we can get through life without doing well in chemistry or French or a lot of subjects. But how can you be an American citizen, an American voter, without having a basic understanding of American history? So we share the perception that you've just articulated, that there's a great deficiency everywhere. We don't dwell on it because we're focused on the positive. We really want to make incremental change in a positive direction. I don't think that, frankly, that we're helped. I mean, I knew Jim Rees very, very well, and I'm sad that he died recently. A fantastic man. We're partners with Mount Vernon. Jim, I think, was like us. He only used these kinds of diagnostic reports to spur us to do more. And in fact, one of the traveling exhibitions that we do is a partnership with Mount Vernon on George Washington, which was one of the last things we set up to do together before he had to leave Mount Vernon. So it's about moving ahead. Teachers, we need systemic support for teachers in so many different ways. And I think ed schools are getting better about, content mastery in the training of teachers, but that's an area where we try to provide support as well. We take 1,000 or 1,100 teachers a year into our 40 summer seminars, teachers at every level from K to 12. Mm-hmm. And we don't beat them up and say, hey, what a shame you never took a survey course in American history or did that. No, we bring them into an intensive week-long seminar with a great historian like Gordon Wood or Eric Foner or Drew Gilpin-Faust. They get a week's intense exposure, and we do one of them at Mount Vernon as well. So they go back to the classroom with new knowledge, new enthusiasm, new materials, some of the documents and materials and lesson plans that they can implement. Because we figure, every teacher represents 100 students a year who will be touched by this improved history teaching for years to come. Very high leverage.
Okay, so one of the problems that schools are having is lack of funds. So why is it that, big corporations, let's say a Boeing as an example, doesn't fund these kinds of things in high schools with knowing that in the future, that group of students is going to be, or some of them will be, their employees?
Well, I'd start with a different question, David. The United States government doesn't support American history teaching anywhere. The Department of Education has zeroed out its last grant program to support the teaching of American history, which was the Teaching American History Grant Program that Senator Byrd introduced years ago. That's a bad signal. The U.S. government can't spare any money to support American history teaching. And I would look at that, and then I would say, well, every school system in the country is funded by millions or billions of dollars, which they allocate to, development of curriculum and what's taught. And yet history teaching has declined by half an hour a week on average over the last 10 years. So the trends are wrong. I think we need to be pushing back. One of the major initiatives now is the Common Core Standards with its emphasis on math and literacy. And without complaining about that at the policy level, we understand that social studies and history teachers feel like they're being sidelined. So we developed a new curricular initiative called Teaching Literacy Through History. And what it does is brings into a school a parallel track where in the literature or language arts course, teachers use American historical documents. The Gettysburg Address was the first we introduced to do close reading, verbal skills, paraphrase, eventually evidence and essay writing from historical documents. While in the history or social studies course on a parallel track, the historical context of those documents is taught. And we're getting a big response from schools. We did a pilot with Catholic schools in New York City, and we've done now projects in Chicago and Milwaukee, and we hope to take it further because we think that history, of course, can be taught in connection with literature and promote literacy.
Literature meaning works like, now you're talking nonfiction, but also a Huckleberry Finn or a Red Badge of Courage,
Sure.
because developmentally, kids have to have that, I think.
Sure.
Nonfiction doesn't really teach you about feelings, but fiction does.
Well, I think our premise is that the literature syllabus now is entirely literature. But one of the mandates of the Common Core Standards movement is that there would be a significant portion of challenging nonfiction added into the language arts curriculum. Our point is that that doesn't need to be science or economics or psychology. It can be history, and it can be historical texts. And we've found teachers are very responsive to this, but of course the language arts teachers welcome the training in how to unpack these historical documents. The Gettysburg Address, just as one example, and a modern reader might go back to this, our lead teacher here, Tim Bailey, who was the 2009 History Teacher of the Year, has developed this curriculum. And he really awakened me. The first time I watched him do this procedure with the Gettysburg Address, even I noticed that the word dedicate, or a form of the word dedicate, is used 6 different times, 6 different ways in Lincoln's great speech. So it's a really wonderful way to look at how language functions and master those skills, even while we're appreciating the significance of what Lincoln did when he delivered the speech.
That's an Emily Dickinson device, incremental knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love Emily Dickinson.
Well, and I think it's great that you brought up this interdisciplinary aspect of learning history. Did you read the New York Times article about Bill Gates and his work trying to teach history in this new way?
Yes.
I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
I think any way that appeals to the imagination of students and that can open them to this intellectual development is great. I mean, we have to start with that. And in fact, I've been a teacher, for more than 35 years, and I've always believed that learning begins with an imaginative connection. And if kids don't find the light bulb goes on, it's a dreary process, and it's not very efficient, and it doesn't work. So finding ways to engage students imaginatively is the starting point. So I applaud anything that the Gates Foundation supports. In this instance, I know they're going back to kind of global and cosmic and biological history. And of course, that's a great idea. We have that implicitly here in New York City because the Gilder Lehrman collection's on deposit at the New York Historical Society. And across the street is the Museum of Natural History with its planetarium. So you can literally go from the New York Historical Society with New York City history, Gilder Lehrman with American history, across the street to the history of all the species of the world, and eventually to the history of the cosmos in ever-expanding circles.
There's no shortage of how you can be smart in New York City. That is very true. And I think that relates to what you're doing here. We, as David said, when we started the Grateful American Foundation, we had the opportunity to meet you at Mount Vernon when you were giving the Washington Book Award to Andrew O'Shaughnessy. And since then, we've just been fascinated by the work that you do. And when we talk to other people about it, not everyone is knowledgeable or enlightened to what you're doing. And one of the things that I know that you just launched, which is really brilliant, is helping students in advanced placement classes study better. So tell us a little bit about that program and other programs that people can access just through their laptops.
Well, this goes back to David's point about how we learn as we're going and opportunities present themselves. We've focused on teachers for years. But we discovered about 2 years ago that 20% of the registered users on our website were K-12 students. And yet, at the time, we had absolutely nothing that reached out directly to them. So I thought, well, if students are finding their way here in spite of ourselves, maybe we should turn and focus on what they need and talk to them directly. And the first thing was, AP history. We've got thousands of students every year in an AP history class. They're academically ambitious. They're looking for more. Let's try to help. So we did a pilot. It took us 10 days to whip up a little pilot video last May. We got it online 12 days before the AP US History test. And in those 12 days, once we launched it, it became the most watched video of any that we'd ever put on our website. So we said, aha, that's a market test.
We're onto
If
something.
students are interested, we better get to work. So immediately we commissioned a team internally here to do a much more elaborate and year-long AP US History resource program online. It will follow the 9 units of the AP US History syllabus, more or less. And for each of them, there are videos with teachers giving an overview of the subject. There are documents that are useful in the DBQ questions. There are tips about multiple choice questions. There are chances to see videos of other historians giving deeper explications of that particular period. And all of this is there in a way that students can access free online and their own timetable. They can spend 20 minutes, they can focus on preparing for the test in a particular way, or they can spend a couple of hours and delve really deeply into a subject. We see it as useful to them in many ways. They could follow it along in tandem with their course at school and enrich and support and deepen what's going on at school. They can also use it as a review experience. So it's 10 days before the test at the end of the year. You can go back and say, well, my teacher was sick the week we covered the Civil War and I missed a bunch, so I'm going to use this unit to deepen it. Or I want to use this course as a whole, an overall review. But our goal is to give students multiple avenues of access to something that might help them in different ways to do better in a meaningful way on the AP test. So far, the results are outstanding. We have 1 unit mounted, and the web usage has been intense, and I hope it's going to ramify all year long.
It sounds great. And I think it also reflects what you do here just in general, is you respond to needs. And you were gracious enough to invite David and I to your gala this year, where a former First Lady Laura Bush spoke and amazing author David McCullough spoke. But what I was really taken by was that the students were speaking, and
Yes.
they were incredibly brilliant and thoughtful and smart, and really a breath of fresh air when you think about that these students will be leading us into the future. So tell us, what made you make that decision to not just focus on the celebrities, to bring the kids in, and how does that reflect your mission here?
Well, that gala is a kind of miniature drama of what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring together all of the important players in a significant way. So yes, Laura Bush was our honoree. She's been a wonderful friend of Gilder Lehrman. She launched the History Teacher of the Year award back in 2004 from the White House, and for the first 5 years presented the award. So it was fantastic that she agreed to come. David McCullough, who's been honored in the past, is our trustee. So yes, we have the support of some of these really illustrious people. And then we had our donors in the room. I'm glad you guys came, and I hope you'll come every year, because as you saw, there were students too. And I've wanted students to be not just guests at the gala, but people who helped to deliver the evening. So the welcome, the introductions, some of the explication of the program, must have 4 or 5 different students up front. We must never forget that the students are the ultimate objective of what we're doing. It's easy for adults to go off and congratulate themselves. Oh, I'm giving some money, and here's Laura Bush, I can shake her hand. But the kids are what it's about. And so we put them in the program because we want to remind ourselves and show everybody who's involved, this is the core mission. And by the way, these are some of the products of what we've been doing. You probably remember, but one of the students there, Masha, is a child of immigrants from Uzbekistan. She came to the United States at 10, not even speaking English. She was graduating from Abraham Lincoln High School in Brooklyn with highest honors, number 2 in her class, an outstanding history student in our history program there. And she's now, as I speak to you, a freshman at Barnard College here in New York City, going on to do history and pre-med at the same time. That's the kind of kid, you dream of creating opportunities for a kid like that. So to put her story and her personality out in front of the people at that dinner was everything to us. And I'm glad you liked it.
Loved it. And I actually had the opportunity to talk with her mom at length, and that was really special too. You could see how she was shaping that wonderful child, and how the kid was just stellar. So I know that we only have a few more minutes with you, but I want to talk a little bit more about the History Teacher of the Year Award. I know that you're just about to name the 2014 recipient, and we are very grateful that you're partnering with us so that we can report and get tips for parents from those amazing teachers.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the origin of that award and who wins it and what it actually means to that teacher.
Well, it began in a phone conversation in late 2003. One of our trustees, John Now, wonderful philanthropic man in Houston, businessman who's supported history and the Civil War Trust and the University of Virginia. He's an incredible force. He's also connected with the Bush family. And he called me and said, I may be able to put a proposal in front of the Bush family about something important in American history. What can we do? I said, a teacher award. And that was about Thanksgiving of 2013. And this is how quickly people decide things. On January 15th, we were in the White House with Laura Bush taking the lead to announce a History Teacher of the Year award. But we didn't want it just to be a national honor. So in fact, we have 50 state teachers of the year nationwide who get a cash award, and there's a library of materials in honor of Mrs. Bush, who was a school librarian. An archive of historical books and materials goes into that winner's school library as a permanent resource, and a big ceremony honoring them. For me, the key was that we opened this to nominations at every level because I wanted this to be community-based. So a parent, a student, a colleague, a principal, a member of the community can nominate a teacher for History Teacher of the Year. All they have to do is go to our website, give us the name and email, and we'll take it from there. I think for these underappreciated teachers, the most meaningful thing might well be that they were nominated by somebody in their community or a former student from their class. I think that means everything to teachers. So we really wanted this to be a large-scale honor that would spread across the whole history teaching profession. And so far, it's worked well. You'll be there when the national winner is announced this year, and I think it'll be exciting. And as you know, these are some of those talented people in the country. There'll be some good tips.
Yes, and our foundation is dedicated to restoring enthusiasm in American history, and we couldn't think of a better organization to partner with to help spread the word about what you're doing, because clearly you've got boots on the ground and making all these teachers just shine as they do in their classrooms.
Well, it's fun, and I'd love you guys, David, come in anytime to our seminars. We have things going on all year. As you saw last night, we had a little book party for a wonderful historical novel set in Charleston that's just come out. But we have things going on. I know you're based in Washington, but it'd be wonderful if you came frequently because there are events constantly happening. Our big book prizes, the Frederick Douglass Book Prize, the Lincoln Prize. You've seen the George Washington Book Prize at Mount Vernon. These are going on over the course of the year, and it brings really good people together every time.
Yes, it's excellent. Well, we look forward to many more conversations and partnerships and spreading the word about what you're doing, what we're doing.
Well, I'd like to hear about that. Would you say something about the Grateful American Foundation and what the aspirations are and the ambitions? Because I think it is a great partnership, but I'd like to learn more.
That actually will be episode 2 of this 2-part series. So let's finish this one out, and then we'll come back again, and you can interview David about the Grateful American Foundation.
I'd love that.
Okay. So we'll stop for now. We want to thank Jim Basker, who is president of the Gilder Lehrman Institute for American History here in New York City. And all of his History Teachers of the Year award will eventually be columns in our Tips for Parents page on grateful-american-foundation.com. You are listening to the Grateful American Radio Show. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, your co-host, with David Bruce Smith, founder of the Grateful American Foundation. We look forward to talking to you more. You have been listening to the Grateful American Radio Show, hosted by author and publisher David Bruce Smith. Here's to restoring enthusiasm in history for kids and adults too.